They told us faith had all the answers. That doubt was dangerous. That asking too many questions meant you were lost. But Neil deGrasse Tyson didn't buy it. He asked one question, a simple tweet, that cracked the foundation of an entire belief system. If Jesus doesn't show up, do the faithful become atheists? That one line exposed something religion never wants you to notice. That belief only survives as long as it never has to face proof. Because the moment you test it, it collapses. The moment you measure it, it vanishes. And the moment you question it, the mask falls off completely. In this video, we're diving into the brutal truth Neil deGrasse Tyson revealed, why religion fears science, how entire civilizations once thrived on reason before faith shut the lights off, and what really happens when curiosity becomes the ultimate sin. Stay till the end, because Tyson's final point isn't about destroying religion. It's about freeing the mind from it. The tweet that broke the internet. It started with one question. If Jesus doesn't show up, do the faithful become atheists? Just a tweet, 16 words, but it hit like a thunderclap. Neil deGrasse Tyson wasn't trolling. He wasn't even trying to be provocative. He was doing what science does best, testing a claim. Because here was a prophecy, a very specific one, predicting the exact day of judgment. Not someday, not soon. May 21st, 2011, the end of the world, they said. The return of Christ. The final proof of faith. And all Tyson did was ask what should have been the obvious follow-up. What happens when it doesn't happen? When the sky stays quiet and life just goes on? Within hours, his timeline exploded. Some believers attacked him, others defended him, and a few tried to explain why prophecy doesn't have to be literal, as if failed prediction had suddenly become part of the plan. That's when Tyson noticed something deeper. Most people weren't defending God. They were defending themselves, the version of reality they'd been taught to never question. Faith had built a wall around doubt, and Tyson had just found the crack. He wasn't mocking belief, he was measuring its reaction to failure. And what he found was the one thing every religion fears most: accountability. Because if your prophecy can fail and your faith still survives untouched, then it was never about truth to begin with. It was about identity. And identity doesn't yield to evidence, even when the evidence is silence. That tweet didn't end the world. It just revealed who's still afraid to live in one that can be proven. Faith cracks under a microscope. Every religion claims to have the answers. Where we came from, why we're here, what happens when we die. Big questions, comforting stories. But Tyson asks the one question religion can't handle: what happens when those answers are tested? Because when belief meets evidence, something fascinating happens. It starts to evaporate. Surveys show nearly 90% of everyday people say they believe in God, some version of a personal, listening deity who answers prayers and watches over them. It feels universal, unshakable, until you start climbing the ladder of education. Once you reach advanced degrees, masters, PhDs, the number drops to around 60%. Still a majority, but the decline has already begun. Because higher education doesn't just teach facts, it teaches doubt. It teaches you how to question, to test, to verify. And when that habit sets in, faith starts to look less like truth and more like nostalgia. Then you enter the world of scientists, people who live inside that process every day. The biologists, the physicists, the mathematicians, the ones who make a living poking holes in ideas to see what's left standing. Among them, the number falls again, to about 40%. And when you reach the top of that pyramid, the elite scientists, the National Academy, it collapses to just 7%. 7% still praying to a personal God. 7% clinging to something unprovable, surrounded by galaxies of proof. Tyson didn't gloat at that statistic. He marveled at it. Because it proved something profound. The more we learn about reality, the less we need mythology to explain it. Knowledge doesn't kill faith. It just makes it harder to pretend. The birth of doubt, and why it scares the church. Philosophy didn't destroy faith. It simply asked, why? And faith had no answer. From the beginning, doubt was treated like a virus, something dangerous that could infect the flock. But in truth, doubt was the first spark of freedom. It's what separates curiosity from obedience. Socrates didn't reject the gods. He just refused to accept anything without reason, and for that, he was killed. His crime? Corrupting the youth with questions. Neil deGrasse Tyson stands in that same tradition. He's not trying to erase belief, he's trying to drag it into the light. Because the moment you shine reason on revelation, the magic fades. Philosophy taught humanity that wisdom doesn't come from memorizing answers, it comes from challenging them. That's why every major religion in history has feared the thinkers more than the heretics. Heretics can be burned, ideas can't. Tyson points out that when you look at philosophers today, less than 1% still call themselves religious, and even that tiny group mostly includes theologians, philosophers of faith, not of truth. Philosophy, he says, birthed atheism, not because it hates God, but because it refuses to kneel before untested claims. The church calls that arrogance. Tyson calls it progress. For centuries, religion promised that the more you believe, the closer you get to truth. But philosophy flipped that upside down. The more you question, the closer you get to reality. That's why faith fears philosophy, and why, even now, curiosity remains its greatest threat, because every why whispered in the dark pulls one more mind into the light. The classroom that exposed America's hypocrisy. Imagine sitting in a history class and hearing your teacher say, "If you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell." That's not faith, that's indoctrination, delivered by someone paid to teach facts. And it happened not in some fringe school, but in a public one, a middle school in New Jersey. In that classroom sat a Muslim girl who was told she was already damned. The same teacher insisted Noah carried dinosaurs on his ark, and that the Big Bang and evolution were just theories. When the story broke, most people called it a violation of the First Amendment, the separation of church and state. But Neil deGrasse Tyson saw something worse. It wasn't just about religion invading the classroom, it was about ignorance holding authority. So he wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times, and it was brutal in its precision. He didn't attack Christianity, he didn't mock belief, he attacked the real problem, the teacher's scientific illiteracy. The case is not about the need to separate church and state, he wrote. It's about the need to separate ignorant, scientifically illiterate people from the ranks of teachers. That one sentence hit like a hammer, because Tyson wasn't fighting faith, he was fighting misinformation, masquerading as education. When a teacher preaches fantasy as fact, the damage goes far beyond religion. It trains children to confuse confidence with truth, to believe authority over evidence. That's how entire generations stay chained to myths that collapse under scrutiny. Tyson's point was simple but devastating. The danger isn't belief, it's blindness in power. And as long as ignorance can stand at the front of a classroom, religion will never be the only thing teaching people what not to question. The prophecy that failed in real time. The 21st of May 2011, the day the world was supposed to end, billboards warned of Judgment Day. Preachers shouted in the streets. Families quit their jobs, sold their homes, and waited for the heavens to split open. Across the world, thousands believed they were living their final hours. And then, nothing happened. The sun rose. The sky stayed quiet. Life went on exactly as before. For Neil deGrasse Tyson, this wasn't just another failed prophecy. It was a live experiment in human psychology. He didn't react with mockery or outrage. He asked a single question that sliced straight to the core. If Jesus doesn't come, do the faithful become atheists? He already knew the answer. They wouldn't. Because faith isn't built on evidence, it's built to survive without it. When reality contradicts belief, believers don't abandon the belief, they rewrite the story. Harold Camping, the preacher behind the doomsday prediction, simply moved the date, 1st to October. Then, indefinitely. The world's end was postponed, not disproven. And his followers accepted it, because the human mind hates being wrong more than it hates being lied to. Tyson called this out for what it was, cognitive dissonance. When belief and truth collide, one must yield. But religion has evolved to make sure it's never the belief. That's why failed prophecies never end faith. They strengthen it. Every disappointment becomes a test, every silence, a mystery, every failure, part of the plan. Science says, when something doesn't happen, the hypothesis is false. Faith says, when something doesn't happen, you misunderstood the prophecy. Tyson's tweet didn't just expose one preacher's lie, it revealed the mechanism that keeps all of them alive. The apocalypse didn't come that day, but the illusion stayed bulletproof. How science kills myths, and why that's a good thing. Science doesn't hate religion, it just refuses to lie for it. The difference between them isn't morality, it's method. Religion starts with an answer and works backward to protect it. Science starts with a question and accepts wherever the truth leads, even if it's uncomfortable. That's why, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says, the good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe in it. When evidence walks into the room, myth has only two options: evolve or vanish. Most choose to vanish, because belief built on certainty can't survive correction. It's fragile. It needs mystery to breathe. Science, on the other hand, thrives on not knowing. It treats ignorance as fuel. Every experiment, every failure, every discovery, it's all part of the same process, turning mystery into understanding. Tyson often reminds people that science doesn't destroy faith. It exposes what was never true to begin with. It doesn't care if you like the result. It doesn't bend to tradition or comfort. Gravity doesn't stop working when you pray. Diseases don't disappear because you believe harder. The universe doesn't owe your feelings consistency, it only offers reality. And that's the terrifying beauty of it. Once you let go of needing the world to make emotional sense, you start to see it as it truly is: vast, indifferent, and magnificent. Science doesn't make life meaningless, it gives meaning a higher standard. It demands that what we believe be earned, not inherited. Tyson's point is simple, but liberating. The truth isn't sacred, it's testable. And every time humanity chose to test its sacred truths, we took one step closer to freedom. Religion asks for loyalty. Science asks for honesty. And that's why one needs protection from questions, and the other invites them. The president who claimed the stars for God. After 9/11, President George W. Bush stood before the nation and tried to draw a line between us and them. To comfort a shaken America, he said, "Our God is the God who named the stars." It sounded powerful, poetic, until Neil deGrasse Tyson pointed out a brutal truth. 2/3 of those stars already have names, and they're Arabic. Tyson wasn't nitpicking. He was exposing a blind spot that runs deep in Western thinking, the habit of wrapping scientific achievement in religious identity while ignoring who actually made those discoveries possible. The irony is staggering. The heavens Bush claimed as proof of Christian creation were mapped, cataloged, and named by Muslim astronomers 1,000 years earlier, during the Islamic Golden Age. While Europe was burning heretics, Baghdad was charting the cosmos. Words like algebra, algorithm, and even zenith come from Arabic. Our number system, those same digits typed on every computer screen, was born in that era. Islam at that time wasn't at war with knowledge, it was fueled by it. Scholars debated physics, medicine, and mathematics with an openness that put medieval Europe to shame. But Tyson's point wasn't just historical, it was philosophical. Civilizations rise when they value curiosity over dogma, and collapse when they confuse faith for knowledge. Bush's comment revealed how easy it is for religion to claim ownership of wonder while forgetting who earned it. The stars don't belong to any god, any nation, or any book. They belong to reality itself. Tyson's quiet correction wasn't a jab, it was a reminder. Truth doesn't care who claims it. The cosmos is not patriotic, and it's certainly not Christian. Every name written across the night sky, from Arabic to Latin to Greek, is a monument to one idea: the universe rewards those who seek, not those who assume. The rise and collapse of the Islamic Golden Age. 1,000 years ago, the Islamic world wasn't defined by conflict, it was defined by curiosity. Baghdad was the center of global knowledge, home to the House of Wisdom, where scholars from every background gathered to translate, debate, and discover. They invented algebra, refined astronomy, preserved Greek philosophy when Europe had forgotten it. For centuries, Islam was the torchbearer of science. And then, the light dimmed. One scholar, Al-Ghazali, declared that the manipulation of numbers is the work of the devil, and that every event in nature happens only because God wills it. Drop a stone, it falls because Allah decided so, not because of gravity. A storm, divine will, not weather patterns. When that mindset took hold, curiosity died overnight. Neil deGrasse Tyson calls it the moment the lights went out, because that single shift from discovery to dogma turned a civilization of thinkers into a culture of followers. Once you believe that everything is already explained by divine will, the need to explore disappears. There's nothing left to test, nothing left to learn. Tyson uses this story not to attack religion, but to show a recurring pattern. The same thing happens every time belief replaces evidence. Civilizations don't collapse in explosions, they fade, one unanswered question at a time. The scientists stop asking, the philosophers stop challenging, and the priests start deciding what's safe to think. The Islamic Golden Age didn't fall because its people grew less intelligent. It fell because they were told to stop wondering. And that's the real danger Tyson warns about. Curiosity isn't just a virtue, it's the engine of survival. When faith replaces evidence, progress doesn't die all at once. It suffocates quietly, until the stars that once guided us become symbols of what we stopped reaching for. The 7% who still pray. Even among the most advanced minds on Earth, the people who split atoms, map galaxies, and decode the laws of nature, a small group still bows their heads in prayer. Just 7%. That number fascinated Neil deGrasse Tyson, not because it proved faith's endurance, but because it revealed something far more human, how deeply our early programming runs. Tyson didn't mock them, he was curious. How can someone spend a lifetime studying cause and effect, evidence and error, and still believe an invisible being is listening to their thoughts? His answer wasn't arrogance, it was empathy. He understood that belief isn't just intellectual, it's emotional, it's inherited, it's tribal. We're raised to equate faith with goodness, to see doubt as betrayal, and even the most rational minds carry those emotional imprints long after they've outgrown the stories that built them. That 7% is proof of something profound, not divine truth, but psychological gravity. You can step out of religion intellectually, but emotionally, it takes longer to leave. Tyson calls this the residue of indoctrination, the comforting idea that someone, somewhere, is watching over you. It's hard to give that up, even when you know better. What fascinates him isn't that 93% of elite scientists reject God, it's that 7% still can't. That's the real mystery worth studying. Because if some of the brightest minds in history still cling to faith, it means religion doesn't just live in churches. It lives in habits, in fears, in the quiet spaces where logic doesn't reach. Tyson's takeaway isn't to shame them, it's to remind us how powerful early conditioning can be. Knowledge can dismantle belief, but only courage can let it go. The brutal truth, and the real freedom beyond faith. Here's the truth Neil deGrasse Tyson leaves us with. Religion doesn't fail because it's evil, it fails because it stops curiosity. From the moment you're told, "Don't ask," your growth ends. The story is set, the answers are fixed, and every question becomes a threat. But the universe doesn't fear your questions, only dogma does. The stars don't care what you believe about them, they simply are. They burn, they collapse, they create life from chaos. That's truth, untouched by belief. Tyson reminds us that curiosity is humanity's real birthright. It's what carried us out of caves, across oceans, and into space. Every breakthrough we've ever made began with doubt, with someone brave enough to say, "What if the story is wrong?" Religion calls that arrogance, science calls it progress. The difference isn't just philosophical, it's existential. One demands obedience, the other demands courage. The more you learn, Tyson says, the less you need faith. Not because knowledge replaces meaning, but because it reveals that meaning doesn't need permission. You don't have to be afraid of mystery. You can explore it. You don't have to worship creation. You can understand it. That's what faith was always afraid of, that once people learned how reality truly works, they'd realize they never needed invisible hands to guide them. The brutal truth isn't that religion lies, it's that it limits. It asks you to stop too soon. Tyson's message, stripped to its core, is liberation. To look up, question everything, and realize the universe is far more awe-inspiring without the illusion of control. Because real freedom doesn't come from faith, it begins the moment you outgrow it. So, what do we do with all of this? Tyson never said, "Stop believing." He said, "Start thinking, start asking, start testing." Because truth doesn't need protecting, it needs participating. Religion wants worshippers. Reality wants explorers. The difference between them isn't belief, it's permission. Permission to question, to fail, to admit you don't know and still keep searching. That's what makes science not just a method, but a mindset, a quiet rebellion against blind certainty. Faith told us that answers were sacred, but Tyson reminds us that questions are holier. Every discovery humanity has ever made came from someone who refused to settle for, because God said so. Every moment of progress began with doubt, the same doubt religion tried to shame out of us. And that's the freedom Tyson is really talking about, not freedom from belief, but freedom from needing belief. When you stop worshiping explanations, the universe becomes infinitely larger, infinitely more beautiful. If this made you think, if it challenged something you were taught to never question, then share it. Subscribe, because the more people dare to think freely, the faster the lights of reason return.